Okay guys, so 2.3 is continuing. So again, it's day 3. And I found out that my video is coming before my audio, so please bear with me. For some reason it's not matching up, but hopefully you guys can still follow it. There's a couple second delay there. Okay, so this one says factoring quadratic expressions where a is equal to 1. Okay, so you know that if we go this way, it's expanding. Okay, the opposite of expanding that is factoring it. So we're going to be starting from this, okay, and then going to this eventually. All right, now we start with what we call a simple trinomial. I need you to recognize simple trinomials. Okay? That's important that you recognize what simple trinomials are. And it says here, when factoring a polynomial, always check to see if there's a greatest common factor. If there isn't, the other two methods of factoring need to be used. Okay? So in this case, there will not be a greatest common factor, okay, because our a value, where my pencil is there, is always 1, okay? So it says, right here where my finger is, when factoring ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is equal to 1, you must find two integers that meet the following conditions. So they must add to the letter b, and the letter b is your middle variable, right where my pencil is, okay? And they must multiply to the letter c there, okay? So follow me along on this one, all right? We did a little bit of this in grade 10 academic. So in this case, you have to identify your letter c and your letter b. So in this case, they got to multiply to c. So I put a little multiply times multiplication symbol there to -5, and they have to add to b, which is adding to 4. Okay? So this is where your mental math comes up. You got to think of two integers that multiply to -5 and add to 4. So I always tell my class to do the multiplication first, because there's less possibilities with multiplication. Okay, so two numbers that multiply to -5. So you know one's got to be negative, one's got to be positive. Okay, so if you're thinking 5 and -1, that's a possibility, right? Now, remember 5 and -1. They have to add to +4. So let's do the multiplication first. -5 times 1 is -5, so that checks out. -5 plus 1, okay, is positive, +4. Oh, I'm sorry. So it's got to add to +4. Okay, so you've got 5 and -1. So 5 times -1 is -5, so that checks through. And 5 plus -1 is +4. Okay, so I need you to write down your two numbers in this circle. Okay, don't put those numbers in brackets, because then it's going to look like an ordered pair. Okay, and then once you have those two numbers, which is the tough part, you make your two brackets. So you make two sets of brackets like this. Okay, and you write x, in this case x, because we're using the x variable, x plus 5 in one bracket, and then x minus 1 in the other bracket. And you're done. You fully factored that. Okay? Now remember, if you perform FOIL on this, which is what you did yesterday, you're going to get your question as the answer. So expanding and factoring are opposites. Okay? Now, it only is going to come with practice, so let's practice and do another one. So in this case, look at my finger. two numbers that multiply to positive 12. And they must add to positive 7. So let's do the multiplication first. So think of two numbers that multiply to 12. So let's think 6 times 2. 6 times 2 does multiply to 12, but 6 plus 2 is not 7. Okay? So that's where you got to think of two other numbers. So let's think of 4 and 3. So 4 times 3 is 12, correct? And 4 plus 3 is 7. So those are your two numbers. Once you got your two numbers, you make two sets of brackets. In the first bracket, you put x plus 4. In the second bracket, you put x plus 3. Okay? Getting the hang of it? All right, let's try the last one here on this page. So, two numbers that multiply to letter C, which is positive 21. And don't lose your negatives. Add to a negative 10. Now, your strategies again. You have to have a positive, okay? They have to add to a positive number, but they have to multiply to a positive number, but they're adding to a negative. So a way of getting a positive number is to multiply two negatives. And in this case, it's got to be two negatives because they must add to a negative number. So think of two negative numbers that multiply to positive 21. So if you're thinking negative 7 and negative 3, you're right. So negative 7 times negative 3 is positive 21. That checks through. And negative 7 plus negative 3 is negative 10. So that checks through also. Okay, so then you make your two brackets. First bracket, you put x, or in this case it's a, sorry, so it's a minus 7. Second bracket, a subtract 3. Now, there's a reason why we factor, and I'm going to tell you later on why we factor, okay? Make sure that's an A and not a 9. Right now it looks like a 9 for me, okay? All right, so let's flip the back here. And we just have one more question, or a couple more questions. All right, so two numbers that multiply to positive 5. Add to positive 4. So do the multiplication first. So two numbers that multiply to positive 5. So there's only one combination, 5 times 1, right? But 5 plus 1 is not 4. So you can't use that. And then you might try 1 times 5. 1 times 5, yes, is 5, but 1 plus 5 is not 4. Okay, so in this case, if there are no numbers that you can put in here, then your answer is not factorable. Okay? Now, we gave you example 2 because we told you last time that you must pull out the common factor first. In any type of factoring, you must pull out the common factor first. So in this case, you've got numbers 4, 16, and 48, and you can pull out a 4 before you do anything. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm pulling out a 4 because 4 goes into 4, 4 goes into 16, 4 goes into negative 48. Okay, you can't pull an X out because you don't have any X's here. So then you start. 4 times something is 4x squared. So you need an x squared in there. 4 times something is 16. Drop the x. 4 times something, negative 48. Okay? And now you've got a new question here. Well, if you recognize what's in the bracket, that's a simple trinomial. So let's factor this simple trinomial again. Again, two numbers that multiply to negative 12. Add to positive 4. Do the multiplication first. Two numbers that multiply to negative 12. So you know you have to have a positive and a negative in there. Okay, you can't have two positives because they don't multiply to a positive number. You can't have two negatives because they multiply to a positive number. So you need a positive and a negative number that multiply to negative 12. Okay, so if you're thinking 6 and negative 2, let's test it. So 6 times negative 2 is 12. That's correct. And 6 plus negative 2 is positive 4. So you do the same steps as before. Make two brackets. And you put these numbers in both brackets. So in one bracket, it's going to be x plus 6. In the other bracket, it's going to be x minus 2. Now, the only thing you have to remember here is this 4, you have to drop it. So that would be your final answer right there. Okay, so follow your timeline. Okay, we're on day 3 today. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow, but if not, I'm sure you're in good hands. Okay?